There are more than 31 million people living in Venezuela, a country in South America. It may surprise you that 82% of its population is poor given the size of the country. So why is Venezuela poor? Well, the reasons will be answered in this video. So let's get started. The current economic and political instability in Venezuela serves as a warning about the perilous impact that resource wealth may have on developing nations. Before we take a look at some of the reasons why Venezuela is facing a crisis, let's take a look at the timeline on why the crisis started in Venezuela. Hugo Chávez's election to the presidency in 1999 marked the start of the Venezuelan crisis. Venezuela is an oil-rich nation, and the early 2000s saw high oil prices that generated significant revenue for the government. Chávez used this cash to support initiatives aimed at enhancing the economic and social landscape. Many Venezuelans' standard of living increased between 2002 and 2008, and poverty dropped by more than 20% overall. The economy of Venezuela, however, contracted the Dutch disease as a result of its over-reliance on oil. The early 2010s saw a collapse in the Venezuelan economy as it became unsustainable to pay for social programs with oil profits. Shortages, inflation, and poverty all began to rise. Inflation was at 38.5% when the administration of Chávez came to an end. After Hugo Chávez passed away, Nicolás Maduro took office as president. He kept the same economic policies Chávez had abandoned. Even throughout Maduro's administration, there were significant shortages of products and high rates of inflation. Venezuela had a recession in 2014. The rate of inflation soared to an all-time high of 800% in 2016. The Venezuelan government saw a decline in oil revenue as a result of low oil prices and lower oil production. Because of this, government spending was reduced, which exacerbated the crisis. Venezuelans have protested Maduro's actions, and numerous human rights organizations have taken notice. Due to mismanagement and corruption, Venezuela has entered an economic and political crisis. Although there are many economic effects of the Venezuelan crisis, in this discussion we'll focus on the effects on the Venezuela's GDP, inflation rate, and poverty. Oil prices rose in the 2000s, and Venezuela's GDP per capita followed suit. 2008 marked the GDP's peak, with a per-person GDP of $18,190. Venezuela's economy shrank by 18.6% in 2016. This was the last economic data point released by the Venezuelan government. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, predicted that Venezuela's GDP will have decreased by 22.5% by 2019. Venezuela's inflation rate was 28.19% at the outset of the crisis. The inflation rate in Venezuela reached 929% by the end of 2018 when the government stopped releasing figures. As you can see, inflation in Venezuela was lower than it is now. From 2015 to the end of 2018, the inflation rate rose quickly from 111.8% to 929%. According to estimates, Venezuela's inflation rate reached 10,000% in 2019. The value of the Venezuelan bolivar has decreased due to hyperinflation. As a result, the government unveiled the Petro, a new cryptocurrency backed by the nation's mineral and oil assets. Venezuelans are overwhelmingly poor. According to the most recent data published in 2017, 87% of Venezuela's population is living in poverty. Venezuela's per capita income in 2019 was 72 US cents. 97% of Venezuelans don't know when or where they'll have their next meal. Because of this, Venezuela is now getting humanitarian aid to help some people escape poverty. Now, here are some fast facts on the Venezuela crisis. First, according to the United Nations Migration Agency, Venezuela has had the highest population exodus in recent years due to years of economic and political upheaval. Second, since 2014, more than 6 million Venezuelans have emigrated abroad in search of food, employment, and a better life. Third, Venezuela is still a major source of food insecurity. WFP intends to address this issue by providing 1.5 million kids with school meals by the conclusion of the 2022-2023 academic year. The WFP's principal implementation partner is World Vision. Number 4. Diseases like measles, diphtheria, and malaria that were previously completely eradicated are again increasing and even crossing international borders as Venezuelans migrate as a result of the breakdown of the country's healthcare system. Number 5. Beyond Saudi Arabia, Venezuela has the greatest known oil reserves in the world. And number 6, the annual inflation rate was expected to more than double in 2021, while the monthly inflation rate has maintained above 2,000%. Now here are the unexpected reasons why Venezuela is poor. Number 1. Economic crisis multiple times. The country is currently experiencing its third year of recession. According to the International Monetary Fund, its GDP is predicted to decline by 10% this year. Even as the economy contracts, product prices are rising rapidly. The value of Venezuela's currency has drastically decreased, and this year's inflation is predicted to increase by 475%. Just 2 years ago, $1 was equal to 100 bolivars. Currently, 1,262 bolivars are equal to $1. Number 2. Venezuela's dependence on oil as its profitable export. About 93% of Venezuela's $63 billion in exports in 2014 were petroleum products. Given that Venezuela has one of the greatest known oil reserves in the world, this isn't surprising. Historically, many Venezuelan presidents have exploited petroleum exports and production to boost development, but they haven't succeeded in diversifying their economies. Venezuela said that agricultural products made nearly a third of its GDP in the 1920s, but over a century later, they now account for only 6% of GDP and less than 1% of exports. Number 3. Dependence when it comes to water as their primary source of electricity. Hydroelectricity generates about 80% of Venezuela's electricity. Hydroelectricity is one method of achieving these aims. The world community has recently pushed for cleaner energy that does not rely on fossil fuels. However, hydropower might provide issues if water becomes a scarce resource. The present 3-year drought in Venezuela has been attributed by many to El Niño, an erratic weather phenomenon that has been made worse by the recent increase in global temperatures. Venezuela is currently dealing with a shorter work week because of the rationing of energy for the numerous shortages, in addition to the usual issues brought on by water shortages. Since workers now have a smaller window of time during which they can earn money to pay for the essentials of life, these recently prescribed restrictions are blamed for hastening the process of economic collapse. Number 4. Venezuela's unipolar political system. The Socialist Party has controlled the central government for many years, and as the economic crisis in Venezuela has recently worsened, the government has grown increasingly dictatorial, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. Protests are being held across Venezuela as a result of the country's economic problems. Several country residents told the Wall Street Journal that they had to wait in line for hours just to get a meager quantity of food for the day. With the majority of the population on their side, there may yet be time for these people to change the course of their country. Number 5. Increasing food prices and broken hospitals. Food shortages have worsened significantly, making Venezuela's poverty worse. Basics like milk, eggs, flour, soap, and toilet paper were frequently unavailable for weeks or even months to Venezuelans. The government persisted in implementing severe price limits on commodities sold in supermarkets despite a collapsing currency and declining oil revenues. Food has just returned to grocery shelves after the government stopped enforcing price regulations. Few Venezuelans can, however, afford the meal due to exorbitant costs. Number 6. Refugee crisis in the past. Of the 32 million Venezuelans who were thought to be living there, almost 5.5 million have left since 2014. Political, economic, human rights, and humanitarian crises are some of the reasons for the exodus. Many Venezuelans living abroad continue to have an illegitimate status, which makes it difficult for them to get work permits, send their kids to school, and get access to healthcare, while also leaving them open to abuse and exploitation. Number 7. Humanitarian emergency during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since 2017, when the health minister disclosed statistics revealing a 65% increase in maternal mortality in 2016 and a 30% increase in newborn mortality, the government hasn't published epidemiological data. The minister was fired a few days later. Due to the breakdown of Venezuela's healthcare system, infectious and vaccine-preventable diseases are once again on the rise. A decrease in operating capability has been brought about by shortages of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies, disruptions of the basic utilities at healthcare institutions, and the exodus of healthcare staff. 1 in 3 Venezuelans, according to the World Food Program, is food insecure and in need of assistance. According to the 2020 National Survey of Life Conditions, 30% of children under 5 had chronic malnutrition or stunting, and 8% had acute malnutrition based on data gathered before the pandemic. Because of the reduction of school food programs, many families are having trouble feeding their older children. Due to limits imposed by COVID-19, school attendance, which had already plummeted as a result of the humanitarian crisis, has decreased even further. Number 8. The economic sanctions. The nation with the most sanctions against Venezuela is the United States. Sanctions against Venezuela were first implemented by the US in 2009, but under Donald Trump's administration, they greatly intensified. The majority of the US sanctions target Venezuela's industries related to gold, oil, finance, and defense and security. Venezuela's revenue from the gold and oil industries has been damaged by this. Other countries have also sanctioned Venezuela, including Greece, Italy, Iran, Mexico, Colombia, and Panama. Venezuela has practically been cut off from the rest of the world by these sanctions. These sanctions are intended to persuade Maduro to change his destructive policies and to persuade the Venezuelan government to alleviate the harsh conditions that a lot of Venezuelans are subjected to. Number 9. Venezuela is under petrostate. But what is petrostate? A petrostate is an informal word for a nation with a number of connected characteristics. Oil and natural gas exports are a major source of government revenue. An elite minority holds a disproportionate amount of economic and political power, and corruption is rampant and government institutions are weak and unaccountable. Algeria, Cameroon, Chad, Ecuador, Indonesia, Iran, Kazakhstan, Libya, Mexico, Nigeria, Oman, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Venezuela are among the nations that are frequently referred to as petrostates. What's behind this petrostate? The Dutch sickness, so named by economists in the 1970s after the Netherlands discovered natural gas in the North Sea, is regarded to constitute a risk for petrostates. A resource boom in a country with economic problems draws significant inflows of foreign capital, which boosts imports because they're now more affordable and causes the local currency to appreciate. This drains labor and resources from other economic sectors like manufacturing and agriculture, which economists argue are more crucial for expansion and competitiveness. As these labor-intensive export sectors struggle, unemployment may increase and the nation's reliance on resource exports may become unhealthy. In severe circumstances, a petrostate forgoes domestic oil extraction in favor of obtaining the majority of its oil riches via heavy taxes imposed on foreign drillers. The economies of petrostates are then extremely exposed to erratic changes in the price of energy and capital flight. The resource curse also has an impact on governance. There are frequently shaky relations between the government and its populace in petrostates, since they rely more on export money and less on taxes. Venezuelans have nowhere to go. Most Venezuelans are emigrating to nearby nations. The majority of the 5.4 million Venezuelans who left the country have stayed in Latin America and the Caribbean. More than 1.8 million Venezuelan migrants have settled in Colombia, where there's the biggest concentration. Don't forget to click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, hit the like, and share this video with your money and business-minded friends. Until next time.